The low hum of diesel engines is a sound every trucker knows, a constant companion on endless highways, a rhythm that carries them from one coast to the other. For most, it means routine, reliability, and the quiet solitude of the road. But sometimes, that familiar sound twists into something else, something you can't explain, something you can't forget. Tonight, we're stepping into the strange world of long-haul trucking legends. Stories whispered at rest stops, traded over CB radios, and dismissed by dispatchers as fatigue or imagination. But one man swears what he saw was no hallucination, and after hearing his account, you may think twice the next time you're driving through the night. This is the story of Daniel Price, a seasoned driver with more than 15 years of highway miles under his belt. He wasn't a rookie, not someone prone to panic or superstition, but what happened to him in the spring of 2021 still keeps him from driving after dark. Daniel was hauling a refrigerated load out of Kansas, bound for Salt Lake City. His route was nothing unusual. Interstate 70, long stretches of flat road dotted with towns too small to show up on most maps. He left just before sundown, planning to make it past Denver before resting. The sky was clear, the forecast calm. Nothing hinted at what was waiting. Around midnight, somewhere past the Colorado border, the atmosphere began to change. He said the night air felt heavier, as if the road itself was pulling him into silence. Even his radio, usually alive with chatter from other truckers, went quiet, just static. No weather reports, no voices, nothing. That's when he noticed the lights. In his mirrors, Daniel spotted what looked like the headlights of another semi, perfectly spaced, trailing behind him at a steady distance. At first he thought nothing of it. Convoys were common, and night drivers often kept pace with each other for safety. But minutes turned to an hour, and no matter how he adjusted his speed, those lights never changed their distance. They followed him with unnatural precision. When he finally pulled into a wide turnout to let the truck pass, the lights slowed too, hovering on the shoulder behind him but never closing in. Daniel rolled down his window, expecting to hear the rumble of another diesel engine idling nearby. But what he heard instead was silence. Total silence. When he looked again, the lights were gone. He thought maybe the driver had shut them off, but that didn't make sense. Out there, in the dark plains, no one kills their headlights, not unless they don't want to be seen. Uneasy, he got back on the highway. The moment he picked up speed, the lights reappeared, right behind him, keeping the same flawless distance. It was then he noticed something else. The road signs looked wrong. The green reflective markers were faded, old, with destinations that didn't exist. A town called Brighton Hollow was listed as 20 miles ahead, but Daniel knew the area well. No such town had ever been there. And then he saw them. Trucks. Not modern semis, but rigs straight out of another era. Square noses, polished chrome, paint jobs too pristine for their age. They emerged from the fog that had started to drift across the highway, one after another, all in perfect formation. Not a convoy, not in the normal sense, because not one of their drivers looked at him. Each truck kept its lane with machine-like precision. Their headlights glowed a faint bluish white, unlike anything he had ever seen. And when he tried to radio in, his CB didn't respond, only static, and faint voices whispering about routes that weren't on any map. When he mustered the nerve to pass, he found that as soon as he drew even with one of those rigs, it would dissolve into mist, vanishing as if it had never been there.
By 3 in the morning, Daniel realized he hadn't seen an exit in hours. His fuel gauge hadn't moved either, stuck at the same level despite the miles he should have burned. His GPS screen showed only a blank stretch of highway, as if satellites had stopped tracking him altogether. Finally, near what should have been dawn, the fog thickened again until he could barely see the lines on the road. A figure appeared on the shoulder, tall, unmoving, dressed in a trucker's cap and jacket that looked decades out of date. The man raised an arm, slow and deliberate, as though signaling him to stop. Daniel's instinct screamed at him to keep driving, and he did, but not before catching a glimpse in his side mirror. The figure had no face, just a void beneath the brim of the cap, darker than shadow, swallowing every trace of light. And then, just like that, it was over. The fog lifted. His GPS blinked back to life. Real road signs appeared again, showing him only a few miles outside of Denver. His radio filled with chatter about traffic and weather, as if nothing had happened at all. Daniel delivered his load on schedule. His logbook showed no missing time. His fuel gauge read exactly what it should. To anyone else, it was just another ordinary run. But Daniel hasn't driven after midnight since that night. He avoids the lonely stretches of highway, and he never looks too long in his mirrors. Because sometimes, when the road is empty and the night is quiet, he swears he still sees them, those ghostly rigs keeping perfect pace in the distance. And he's not alone. Stories just like his circulate in trucker forums and late-night CB conversations. The phantom convoy, the faceless figure, the road signs pointing to towns no one can find. Accounts too similar to ignore, too widespread to dismiss as coincidence. Whether you call it a hallucination, a highway legend, or something far stranger, one truth remains. America's roads are long, dark, and old. Old enough to remember, old enough to hide things that were never meant to be found. And if you're ever out there, alone at night, with only the hum of your engine to keep you company, pay close attention to the lights behind you, because not every convoy is made of trucks you can see.
People think the scariest part of night driving is the wildlife. Elk darting from the ditch, the deer staring blankly into your high beams. Those can wreck a rig, sure, but at least you see them coming. What gets you on the high plains isn't what crosses the road. It's what starts riding along with you when the towns thin out and the radio goes quiet. I've been running loads long enough to measure my life in mile markers. Name's Eli Hart, 22 years behind the wheel. I've crossed the Rockies in sleet, crawled the grapevine behind 3 stalled RVs, slept more nights in a cab than in a bed with a roof. I don't scare easy, but if you ask me why I don't drive past midnight anymore, I'll point you to a strip of Wyoming blacktop between Rawlins and a wind farm that looks like a forest of white bones. Out there, something learned the rhythm of diesel and mirrors and human habit, and it waits for drivers who trust the straight line too much. Dispatch flagged the route early that day. "Watch your crosswinds after Wamsutter," she said, half joking, half not. "And if the weather radio starts talking like a person, just turn it off." The office has a sense of humor. I chuckled, checked my chains, set the reefer temp, and reminded her that ghosts don't pay tolls. Amarillo to Casper, then on to Billings with a refrigerated load that didn't care if I sang to it or drove in silence. The plan was to knock out Wyoming overnight and sleep parked under a stand of cottonwoods behind a truck stop with good coffee. Plans are cute. By sundown, the sky had that western clarity you get after a dry front. Distant mountains drawn sharp as a saw blade, a smear of orange sinking behind them. The wind signs were flashing gusts 45 plus, but I'd hauled in worse. I settled the Peterbilt into that humming equilibrium you learn with time. Throttle feathered just so, hands light on the wheel, eyes sweeping mirrors, gauges, lane, horizon. It felt like any other night, until it didn't. It started with the radio. The CB is the trucker's campfire. Even at 2 a.m., somebody's complaining about a way station or bragging about pie. Mine went bone silent. Not dead. When I spun the knob, I still heard the carrier noise like a sleeping animal, but no voices. NOAA weather on 162.55 picked up, though, and that was its own brand of odd. Instead of the flat robot cadence reading counties and barometric pressure, I got a slow voice repeating mile numbers. 289, 289, 289. No counties, no warnings, just that number, looping like a stuck song, until even the static seemed to chant along with it. The mirrors gave me the next reason to tense up. Clearance lights. 2 pale points. Not the warm halogen eyes of an older rig, not the blue or LED of newer ones. These were almost colorless, like frost. They sat back there at a distance I could have measured with a ruler. I tapped the brakes to bleed 10 miles per hour. The lights shrank in brightness, adjusting with me, not by reaction time, but as if I'd tugged them on a wire. I eased back up. They slid with me, never closer, never farther, perfectly synchronized to the rise and fall of my speed. You test a thing when you don't understand it. It's instinct. I nudged the truck onto the rumble strip just to feel the groan through the steering column. The lights behind me dutifully drifted onto their own invisible rumble strip, though there was only empty night there. They even wobbled when I changed lanes to pass no one at all. It felt like watching your reflection do something you didn't tell it to do.
I reached for my coffee out of habit and noticed the clock on the dash, 2:17 a.m., the same time I'd checked 20 minutes earlier. Trip mirror? Stuck. Fuel? Stubbornly loyal to a quarter tank I'd been burning for the last 50 miles. You start cataloging details to keep yourself sane. Seat vibration? Real. Engine temp? Rock steady. My breathing? Too loud. Civilization? Gone. No farm lights, no town glow, only the red wink of turbines off to my right, each blink a heartbeat you couldn't hear. That's when the signs went wrong. Out here, the green placards are a comfort. They count the world down to digestible pieces. Rawlins, 36, Sinclair, 22, exit 221, 2 miles. Mine started giving me things that didn't exist. County RD4A, authorized vehicles only, then service road, do not enter, where I knew there was nothing but sagebrush. A blue sign appeared promising coffee and diesel and pie, with logos I hadn't seen since the 90s. Beneath it, in metal font punched by a road crew decades ago, open 24 hours. When I passed where those services should have been, there was only a chain-link fence vibrating in the wind and a padlocked gate with no tracks in the dust. Up ahead, the unmistakable silhouette of a way station rose out of the night. Low concrete building, tall sign, a lane striped for trucks with a yellow X over it. The marquee read closed in dead bulbs, but the amber beacon on the roof was inexplicably rotating, washing the pavement with a rhythm that felt like breathing. I didn't need to stop. Closed is closed. But out of the dark, a figure in high vis stepped into the gore point where the exit split, holding a paddle that said slow on one side and stop on the other. The reflective tape threw my headlights back in shards. Orange vest, hard hat, coveralls black with oil marks. He stood too still. No head tilt, no wind buffeting him. When he raised the paddle, it didn't wobble. He turned it to stop with the kind of ceremony you see in training videos. Then he pointed at the way station exit with a gloved finger and kept pointing. Long, straight, insistent. I hit the CB out of reflex. Construction at the station after 2:23? You boys setting up this late? Static. NOAA murmured in my other ear. 289. I could have blown on past and claimed ignorance, but every fiber of trucker training tells you to respect a sign and a flagger. I signaled right, eased off, and watched the mirror while I drifted for the exit. The pale lights behind me did not change lanes. They stayed in the through lane, parallel to me now, but still at that exact impossible distance. As I took the ramp, they slid along the main line like a moon beside a river, unblinking. The way station lot was lit, but wrong. Sodium lamps cast their coffin-yellow glow on clean concrete with no tire marks. The open sign over the office door was half burned out, so it read,
OPN. The vending machine in the corner, visible through glass, was stocked with brands that hadn't existed in 20 years. A clock on the wall read 2:17, the same as my dash, the same as my head.
The flagger didn't come down the ramp with me. He stayed up at the fork, pointing, until he wasn't there anymore. No truck idled, no reefer ticked, no generator thrummed from the scales. It was like someone had built a perfect model of a modern way station in a place the world didn't touch. The big lit sign that usually reads, "Proceed when green," blinked 3 times, paused, blinked 3 short times, paused, then 3 long again. Morse. I didn't know Morse, not really, but even kids who grew up on the internet know SOS when they see it. Beneath the sign, a smaller message board flicked to life for a second, just long enough to push a word through burnt pixels. Bypass. To the left of the scales, a narrow lane peeled off behind the building. I'd never seen it open at any other station. A metal arm that should have been locked vertical hung down across half the lane, like someone had given up lifting it. The sign over it read, "Service access only, no trucks." Whoever had made that sign hadn't met me yet. I took the service lane at a crawl, mirrors inches from cinder block, trailer tires whispering over dust that hadn't known rubber in a while. The lane curved behind a row of scrub and spit me out onto a slender strip of asphalt lined with reflectors that looked hand-hammered into the ground. No number signs, no speed limit. Just a long, dark artery parallel to the highway, with a view through chain link to the main line. Out there I could see the pale lights ghost by, unbothered, never slowing for a station that, according to the state, shouldn't be operating. About 100 yards onto the access road, I saw another figure. This one didn't step into my path. It was standing under a broken yard light, back to me, wearing a reflective jacket from another era. Blocky stripes, odd placement, a style I hadn't seen since my first safety meeting. The jacket hung wrong, too neat for the wind. At the figure's feet was a square of plywood painted with an arrow that matched the reflector's curve. Someone had propped a paper cup under one corner to keep it from skating in the breeze. I slowed to a roll and leaned toward the glass. "You folks redirecting us around something?" I said to a person who didn't turn. The shape lifted an arm, pointed down the access road the way a flagger will when they're sick of repeating themselves, then lowered it again with a motion so smooth it felt rehearsed. No acknowledgement, no wave, no nod. I didn't wait for more. I followed the reflectors. The access road ran for an impossible time. I say impossible because I watched the main line through the fence and the mile markers there clicked by wrong. I caught 227, then, without seeing the gap, 231, then 226 in a quick flash like a slideshow out of order. The turbines beyond turned and didn't turn. The wind shifted in the cab without touching my skin. Noah droned, 289, then, in a whisper the speaker wasn't designed to make, "Bypass." I came to a gate standing open over fresh gravel. Beyond it, high beam white, was an on-ramp, a normal on-ramp, angled just so, with the green sign I'd been craving all night, I-80 East. Only the number listed beneath it wasn't the one my brain expected. Not 224, not 225. The sign read 289. I don't remember making the decision to go. There are moments in driving where thought is a luxury you let go of. You align the trailer, you check for cars, you move. The PD hit the main line with the kind of smooth merge you get when the world wants you to keep going. The highway stretched ahead in honest geometry, lines bright, texture right. The turbines blinked red at their proper tempo. The fuel gauge climbed off quarter and began its lazy slide toward an honest eighth. The clock rolled to 2:18. For the first time in an hour, if it had been an hour, I exhaled. Behind me, the mirrors were empty. Not empty like lonely. Empty like a stage after the lights come up. I drove.
The CB woke like a friend clearing his throat. Anyone catch that gust near Elk Mountain? 'Bout took the hat off my Freightliner. A laugh. Another voice complaining about a trooper who loved citations. I wanted to jump in, to blurt what had just happened, to beg someone to tell me they'd seen it too. Instead, I laid my hand over the mic and listened to men talk about pie. At the next real, breathing truck stop, a tilted neon sign, a grease stain you could trust, I pulled in and set the brake hard enough to make the trailer rock. I climbed down on stiff knees and stood in the fluorescent wash, staring at bugs licking light. The coffee tasted like soil and salvation. The cashier, a woman with a name tag that said Joe, slid a receipt across the counter and said, "You look like you saw the state trooper's budget." "What mile marker is this?" I asked. She pointed her chin toward the door. "291. They move signs again after the winter. Your boys never can keep up." I nodded like that explained everything. In a way, it did. I finished the run, put the freight where it needed to be. I didn't tell dispatch anything beyond the usual. Wind bad, traffic fine, reefer steady. I cleared the trip and stared at the empty line where new assignments populate, and thought about what tracks we leave on a road and what tracks the road leaves on us. That night in a motel with air that smelled like last year's cigarettes, I dragged out my laptop and searched for way station anomalies, for talk of closed stations that weren't, for mile markers listed wrong on state DOT updates. I found official maps, stern PDFs with fonts that trusted themselves. I found a hunting forum where a man complained that his GPS made a straight line through the desert for 10 miles and then apologized. I found a thread on a trucking board from 2017 where an old hand said, "If the radio says the same number twice, take the next exit that isn't an exit." The replies were jokes and emojis. The thread was locked.
I phoned a friend in the morning, a guy who'd been running Wyoming since before I bought my first pair of winter gloves. "Ever see the service lane at the 223 station?" I asked him. "Behind the building?" He laughed like I'd told him a good one. "Eli, they tore that station out after the floods in '09. You're remembering the one back at 209. Then he paused. "Why?" "No reason," I said, and it was almost true. I didn't quit. My bills weren't afraid of fog, and my kid needed braces. I did change one thing. I stopped pushing past midnight to make up minutes that no receiver remembers. I park where the truck stop lights touch the pavement, and the chatter on the radio sounds like neighbors. If I feel the air go heavy or the NOAA voice start counting, I look for a lit place where someone would miss me if I didn't come back from the bathroom. I don't test the wire anymore to see if a thing follows when I drift onto the rumble strip. I already know the answer. You can shrug this off, call it fatigue, highway hypnosis, a driver telling a story to keep himself interesting over coffee. I'd love for you to be right. But do me one favor the next time you're out there, between nowhere and nowhere else. Watch your mirrors. Not for the thing that gains on you or drops away, for the pair that stays perfect, as if some engineer measured your fear and built it to spec. If the radio falls quiet like a held breath, and the signs start pointing you to places folks don't talk about at Thanksgiving, find a way station light, a maintenance lane, a stretch of road that's been touched by hands in the last 10 years. Take it. Don't ask permission from a voice that only knows one number. Some miles count you, some miles try to keep you. I can't tell you what the way station was or why the access road knew my name. I can only tell you that there's a reason certain stretches make drivers superstitious without admitting it. We invent rituals for a reason. We flash our markers twice when someone lets us over. We touch the dash when the wind shoves us, and we keep both hands on the wheel. We listen for the wrong kind of silence. And if you ever find yourself rolling under a sky so clear it feels like a lie, with pale lights behind you that never change and a clock that refuses to, remember this from a man who trusts pavement more than people. The safest road isn't always the straight one. Sometimes the only way through is the lane you're not meant to see, the one marked service access only in letters that don't want your eyes. Take it anyway.
I've been on the road most of my life. 2 decades behind the wheel, crisscrossing this country, until the highways feel more like veins in my body than lines on a map. You learn the rhythm of the road, the way nights stretch out longer than the days, the way silence presses against you in a cab. For the most part, I found comfort in that solitude. But there are nights when the highway stops being your companion and starts feeling like it's watching you. Nights when the familiar rules shift just enough to make you realize you're a guest on pavement older and stranger than you think. Well, this story comes from one of those nights. It was early spring, about 3 years ago. I was hauling a refrigerated load from St. Louis up through Nebraska, bound for Cheyenne. I'd run that corridor dozens of times, nothing unusual about it. The weather was mild, skies clear, roads dry. But fatigue has a way of catching up to you no matter how many cups of coffee you down. Around 1 in the morning, with my eyes burning and my logbook screaming for a break, I decided to stop at the next rest area. That was mistake number 1. I don't know if you've noticed, but most rest areas look the same. Squat concrete buildings, vending machines buzzing like flies, a scatter of picnic tables no one uses after dark. The signs announce them a mile or two in advance. But that night, I don't remember seeing a sign at all. Just a sudden exit ramp peeling off to the right, lit by a row of lamps glowing a weak amber yellow. I almost missed it, but the thought of parking and closing my eyes for even 20 minutes was too tempting. The ramp curved longer than I expected, dropping me into a lot surrounded by trees. Strange choice, I thought. Nebraska isn't exactly known for dense forests, but there they were, a black wall of trunks pressing up against the asphalt. The lot itself was nearly empty. Just one car, an old sedan with a faded paint job, parked crooked under a lamp that flickered like a dying heartbeat. I rolled my rig into a spot near the back, set the brakes, and shuttered down. The silence was immediate and heavy, like stepping into a sealed room. No hum of nearby highway, no chorus of insects, just the creak of my cooling engine and the faint buzz of that one struggling lamp. Climbing down from the cab, I felt the air hit me. Not cold exactly, just off. Too still, too dense. I walked my usual lap around the trailer, checking the doors and tires. Everything looked fine. But when I passed the back end, I noticed the sedan under the lamp again. No plates, just a blank rectangle of metal where the tag should have been.
That was mistake number 2. I told myself I was too tired to care. Back in the cab, I cracked the window and leaned my head against the seat, letting my eyelids drift. That's when I heard it. Not a knock this time, not footsteps, just a sound like someone exhaling right outside the door. Long, steady, too close. I jerked upright, scanning the mirrors, nothing but the glow of the trees and the empty spaces of the lot. My pulse hammered in my ears, but eventually I convinced myself it had to be the wind pushing through the cab seals. I settled back again, trying to will myself to sleep. Then the radio came alive. I keep my CB on low, just background noise to keep me company. It had been quiet for hours, but suddenly the speaker hissed with static. Underneath it, faint voices. At first I thought it was just bleed from distant channels, but the longer I listened, the clearer it became. They were calling mile markers that didn't exist. Southbound at 312, westbound at 410, repeat, still walking. The voices were flat, without emotion, like dispatchers reading off a list. I grabbed the mic. Breaker 19, this is Redbird eastbound. You boys run boast mile markers, or am I hearing things? The static swallowed my words whole. No response. I was considering shutting the radio off altogether
when movement caught my eye in the passenger side mirror. Someone was walking through the lot. Not toward the building, not toward the sedan, toward me. At first all I saw was the shape, tall, deliberate steps, arms hanging too stiff at their sides. No reflective vest, no flashlight, no reason to be out there at 1 in the morning. My hand went instinctively to the lock switch on the door, pressing it down twice just to be sure. The figure came closer, slow and steady, until the glow from my side lamp spilled across them. That's when I realized it wasn't a man at all. It was a woman, barefoot, her hair hanging wet across her face like she'd just climbed out of a river. Her clothes looked wrong, an old-fashioned skirt, torn at the hem, and a jacket too thin for the night air. She wasn't shivering, wasn't looking around, just walking, eyes locked on my cab like she already knew I'd be here. I slammed the engine back to life. The roar filled the cab, comforting in its normalcy. The headlights swept across the lot, catching the empty sedan, the dark trees, and the concrete restaurant building. But when the beams hit her, she wasn't there anymore. I shifted into gear, ready to pull out, when the CB crackled again. "Stay parked." The voice was sharp now, commanding. "She wants you to stay parked." That was mistake number 3. I hesitated. In that hesitation, I heard it again, the sound of breath, right outside the passenger door. I didn't look. Couldn't. My hands clenched the wheel hard enough to ache. Then came the whisper. Clear as day, inches from my ear, though no one was inside the cab. "Let me ride with you." That broke whatever spell I was under. I floored the accelerator, wrenching the rig around and heading straight for the exit. Gravel spit from under the tires, the trailer swaying as I fought to keep it straight. The ramp back to the highway seemed longer than before, stretching on like it didn't want to let me go. In the mirrors, the rest area lights flickered, then blinked out entirely, plunging everything behind me into total darkness. When I finally hit the interstate again, relief washed over me so hard I nearly laughed. The road stretched clear and honest under the stars, the hum of tires on asphalt the only sound. For a few blessed minutes it felt like the world had righted itself. But then I looked at the clock. 1:07 a.m., the same time it had been when I first pulled into the rest area. No miles lost, no minutes passed. My logbook, which should have ticked forward at least a half hour, was frozen on the same line.
I didn't stop until I hit a well-lit truck stop another 60 miles down. Place was bustling even at 2 in the morning. Music playing through outdoor speakers, drivers moving in and out. Safe. Normal. I parked under the brightest lamp I could find and sat there until sunrise, the radio off, my mirrors tilted down so I couldn't see behind me. The next day, I asked around, mentioned the rest area just west of Grand Island, the one with the sedan and the trees. Blank stares. A couple of drivers swore there wasn't any rest area on that stretch at all. One even pulled up his GPS and showed me, miles of nothing between exits. Later, out of stubborn curiosity, I checked my dash cam footage. The recording cut out the moment I left the interstate ramp. A full 30 minutes of black screen, then it resumed with me rejoining the highway. Like the camera had simply decided there was nothing worth recording. I've never found that rest area again. Not in daylight, not in maps, not in conversation. It doesn't exist, at least not in any way the world wants to admit. But sometimes, when I'm dead tired and the clock creeps past 1 in the morning, I'll catch myself scanning the shoulder for amber lamps glowing just a little too dim. And I'll hear that whisper again, curling up from the dark corners of memory. Let me ride with you. That's why I don't pull into unknown rest areas anymore. I stick to the busy ones, the ones plastered with signs and cameras and too much noise to ever feel truly alone. Because out here, the road has a way of building its own stops, places that exist for a night, maybe just for you, waiting to see if you'll make mistake number 4.
The highway at night is a different world. Out there in the dark, with nothing but the hum of your engine and the stretch of asphalt vanishing into your headlights, you start to notice things most people never do. Patterns in the shadows, voices on the radio that don't belong to anyone, headlights in the distance that don't behave the way they should. For most drivers, the road is routine, but every so often it reminds you how small you are compared to the miles. And when it does, you either learn to respect it, or you end up as another story whispered between truckers at 3 in the morning. What I'm about to tell you isn't rumor. It isn't a campfire tale. It happened to a veteran driver named Jake Reeves, a man with 25 years of experience who swore he'd seen it all. But one night in the Nevada desert on Highway 50, the so-called loneliest road in America, he learned otherwise. Jake has never driven that stretch again, not after what he saw. And once you hear it, you'll understand why. It was January 2022, and Jake was hauling dry goods eastbound out of Reno, heading toward Salt Lake City. His dispatcher had warned him about the weather, snow squalls moving fast, visibility dropping to near zero. Jake knew the risk, but figured he could beat the storm if he kept rolling. By midnight, the highway had emptied. Not unusual, Highway 50 is famous for being barren, a ribbon of asphalt that cuts across desert and mountains with very few signs of civilization. But this night felt different, too still, too quiet. Even the CB, usually alive with chatter from drivers spread across the state, had gone silent. That's when Jake noticed the headlights. At first, just a pair, far behind him. He figured it was another trucker running the same route. But no matter how long he drove, those lights never grew closer, never fell behind, just stayed pinned to his mirrors, perfectly matched to his speed. He tested it. Slowed to 50. The lights slowed too. Accelerated to 70. They kept pace exactly. Convoys aren't unusual in bad weather, but you can usually hail the other drivers on Channel 19. Jake keyed his mic. "Eastbound on 50, mile marker 173. You back there, driver?" Nothing. Just static. He tried again, louder. "Come on now, I see you. Say something." More static. Then, under the hiss, he thought he heard a whisper. Not words exactly, just a murmur, like someone trying to speak from too far away. At mile marker 190, Jake spotted a sign he didn't recognize. Rest area, 2 miles. He knew Highway 50 like the back of his hand. There weren't supposed to be rest areas for nearly 50 miles in either direction. Still, the need to stop gnawed at him. Fatigue, unease, and the persistent glow of those headlights working on his nerves. He took the exit. The ramp curved, longer than seemed possible, finally spitting him into a lot surrounded by desert scrub. Sodium lamps flickered overhead, casting cones of weak light across cracked asphalt. A restroom building stood in the center, its windows dark, doors chained shut.
Only one other vehicle was parked there, an old cab over semi, paint stripped, chrome dulled, company markings too faded to read. Its clearance lights glowed a dim amber, though Jake couldn't hear any engine running. He eased his rig into a spot. When he checked his mirrors, the headlights that had been following him were gone. Relieved, he climbed down to do a walk-around. The cold hit him like a wall, sharp, unnatural, even for January. His breath came out in heavy plumes. Then he noticed something. The cab over wasn't abandoned. There was a figure in the driver's seat, perfectly still, hands on the wheel, staring straight ahead. Jake raised a hand in greeting. No reaction. The longer he looked, the more wrong it felt. The figure didn't shift, didn't blink, didn't move at all, just sat there like a mannequin positioned behind the glass. Uneasy, he climbed back into his truck, locked the doors, and decided to push on. When he merged back onto Highway 50, the road was empty. No headlights behind him, no sign of the cab over in his mirrors. For a moment, he almost convinced himself he'd imagined it. Then, at mile marker 201, 3 sets of headlights appeared ahead of him, cresting a hill in perfect formation. 3 rigs, side by side, taking up the entire width of the highway. Their headlights glared white, steady, and impossibly synchronized. Jake slowed, expecting them to stagger or pull into a line. They didn't. They kept rolling 3 wide, directly toward him. At the last second, Jake swerved onto the shoulder, heart pounding. The 3 trucks thundered past, engines silent, drivers invisible behind the glass. In his mirrors, he watched them merge seamlessly back into formation, this time behind him. Now he wasn't just being followed, he was being herded. Jake grabbed his mic again, desperation edging his voice. "Whoever's back there, this isn't funny. Talk to me." The CB hissed, then cleared. "Eastbound at 201. He's alone." The voice was flat, male, calm. Another cut in. "Keep him steady. Don't let him off the line." A third voice, lower, rasping. "He'll join us soon enough." Jake froze. None of them had keyed their mics. The voices were coming through open air like the radio had tuned itself to a private channel. His scalp prickled. These weren't voices from the living road. They were something else. At mile marker 215, Jake's engine coughed, the dash lit up with warnings. His temperature gauge spiked into the red. He fought to keep momentum, but within minutes, his rig shuddered to a stop on the shoulder. Hazards flashing, Jake sat gripping the wheel, trying to steady his breathing. The highway was silent. Then, one by one, the 3 trucks behind him pulled onto the shoulder too. They stopped in perfect alignment, just 100 yards back, their headlights blazing. He could see silhouettes in the cabs now, 3 figures, motionless, watching. And then, footsteps. Crunching across the gravel shoulder, growing closer. Someone knocked on his door. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. "Need a hand, driver?" The voice was wrong, too deep, too cold, like it had traveled a long way to reach him. He didn't answer. He didn't move. Another knock, harder this time. "Engine trouble? We've got room in the convoy." He stared straight ahead, every instinct screaming at him not to respond. Then came the whisper, so close it felt like it was inside the cab with him. "Just open the door. You'll never drive alone again."
Jake doesn't remember praying, but he must have, because a few minutes later, real headlights appeared in his mirrors. A pair of halogen beams, warm and normal, cutting through the night. A state trooper pulled up behind the 3 trucks. Red and blue lights flashed, washing the desert in color. And just like that, the convoy was gone. No trucks, no figures, just empty highway stretching into the dark. The trooper tapped on Jake's window, startling him so badly he nearly jumped out of his seat. "You all right in there? Engine trouble?" Jake stammered an explanation, but when he tried to describe the 3 trucks, the officer just gave him a long look. "You're not the first," the trooper said quietly. "Stay moving, driver, and don't stop again until you hit Ely." Jake made it to Salt Lake City. He delivered his load, collected his pay, and never took Highway 50 again. He adds hours, even days, to his runs just to avoid that stretch. But he can't avoid the reminders. Sometimes his CB will crackle to life, and he'll hear those same three voices discussing routes that don't exist anymore, truck stops that closed decades ago, accidents no one alive remembers. And just every now and then, late at night, he'll glance in his mirrors and see 3 sets of headlights, perfect formation, always the same distance back. In the trucking community, the story spread fast. Drivers call it the convoy on 50. Some say the 3 rigs belong to a company that went bankrupt in the 80s after a blizzard took 3 of their drivers. Their bodies were never found. Others claim the highway itself creates echoes, convoys trapped in endless loops, replaying their last run for eternity, always looking for someone new to join. The Nevada DOT denies everything, but troopers admit, off the record, that Highway 50 has more unexplained disappearances than any other stretch in the state. Trucks abandoned, engines running, cabs empty. Jake tells his story as a warning, not to scare rookies, but to prepare them. Out here, he says, the road has rules. Most of the time, they're the ones you know. Check your tires, mind your logbook, keep your distance. But some nights the rules change, and when they do, you'd better know how to recognize it. His advice is simple. If headlights follow you at a perfect distance and never change, don't stop. If your CB picks up voices that talk about places that don't exist anymore, turn it off. And if someone knocks on your door in the middle of nowhere whispering about joining their convoy, don't answer. Because once you ride with them, you don't come back. The highway will always have mysteries, storms, breakdowns, lonely stretches that test the limits of your mind. But every story has a kernel of truth, and every rumor started with a driver who swore he saw something impossible. The convoy on Highway 50 is one of those stories. Whether it's a legend, a haunting, or something stranger still, the warnings remain the same. Next time you're out there, alone on a midnight run, check your mirrors. Watch for the headlights that never pass, never fall back, never leave. Because the loneliest road in America isn't empty. It's just waiting.
The last story is from Jace. 22 years behind the wheel, more miles than birthdays. The kind of driver who keeps a toothbrush in the glove box and a clean pair of socks in the overhead just in case he finds himself a state farther than planned. He'll tell you straight, there's comfort in the monotony of asphalt and mile markers, in the ritual of coffee poured too hot, and the grumble of a diesel that sounds like a loyal dog. But there are nights, he says, where the familiar turns its face, and you realize the road knows you better than you know it. He was 3 months into a contract running Los Angeles to Denver and back again, a corridor he could trace with his eyes closed. The night in question started like any other, a dead stretch past midnight outside Bakersfield. The truck stop with the buzzing neon that read DIESEL when the wind hit it right. A cashier who didn't bother to look up when he slid a coffee and a shrink-wrapped sandwich across the counter. February cold, sharp but not dramatic, made the air smell like aluminum. Jace did what he always did, a slow walk around with a flashlight, palm on each tire, quick glance at the seals, a hand on the trailer door to feel the temper of the steel. Everything was normal enough to be boring. He rolled back on the 46, the road sloping into the dark like a ribbon pulled taut. The cab was a pocket of yellow light. Dash clocks at 12:17, radio on low, CB squelch set where the static sounds like a sleeping animal. The first 10 miles were a meditative hum. The world outside shrank to the twin cones of his headlights, dancing reflectors, and the regular chirp of lane dots under the tires. In the mirror, his own clearance lights winked on the trailer edges like a parade of fireflies. Then, the headlights appeared.
Two small coins of white at first. So far back they might have been reflections in his own glass. Jace thought nothing of it. Someone else heading east? Good. You don't feel quite so alone when there's another set of lamps plying the same black water. He checked again 15 minutes later. Same distance. A half hour after that. Same distance. He tested it without quite admitting he was testing it. Feathered off the throttle until the needle sank 10 miles per hour. The lights dimmed, but not because they were farther away, because the other driver matched him. He pressed the pedal until the tack nudged higher than he liked on this stretch. The lights brightened, held, never closing, never falling back. A tether at 300 yards. You can't help but narrate to yourself alone at night. Come on, man, either pass or don't. He clicked the blinker, slid to the left lane, then back to the right, half expecting the other vehicle to get skittish and go around. Nothing changed. They stayed exactly where they were, caught in his mirror at the identical angle, the identical intensity, the identical space between.
A rest area showed up where he didn't remember one being. The sign blinked, restrooms, vending, 1 mile. The green paint faded to a color somewhere between moss and smoke. He told himself he needed to stretch his legs. He told himself he needed to check a strap he'd already checked. Mostly, he wanted to force those lights to declare themselves. He took the ramp. The mirror went clean. Relief made him laugh under his breath. He looped a lot, 2 picnic tables iced with dew, a block building with opaque windows, a soda machine humming to itself like a refrigerator in an empty church, and rejoined the highway. The lights were there again before he'd straightened the wheel. That was when the quiet stopped being friendly. He reached for the CB like it was a handrail. Breaker 19, eastbound on 4-6, mile marker 182. Anyone else got a shadow back there holding perfect distance? He listened. Static breathed in and out. He tried again on 19, then 17, then 9, because even a long shot is something to do. The hiss changed character. Not louder, not softer, just patterned. A rise and fall like someone rubbing a wet finger around the rim of a glass. Not language, not random. Tones. He turned the volume down to a whisper. The tones didn't mind. They threaded through the noise like a melody you can't quite catch. And the road, impossibly, felt quieter outside the cab than inside it. The grade began. Route 46 lifts and dips and long swells that make your ears pop. He downshifted and let the gear hold him steady. The lights behind faltered, only a fraction, only enough to show they were connected to something that obeyed gravity. Jace felt a little stupid relief at that, like a man who sees footprints and decides ghosts wear shoes. At the top, the sky looked lower, like the clouds had stooped down to listen. On the descent, gravity put its hand on his shoulder. He let the speed build within reason. In the mirror, the lights grew. 200 yards. 150. A clean 100. He cracked his window to hear the other vehicle's tires, its engine, anything to ground the moment in physics. He heard only wind. And under it, the faintest pressure, as if the air itself tightened by a notch. The shape resolved the way a face emerges behind frosted glass. Not a car, not a rig, a black triangle that refused to accept light. The lamps that had masqueraded as headlights weren't in a grill. They were set into the forward point like eyes in a mask. He had the sudden, absurd thought of a manta ray, broad, silent, a thing that swims where it wants and knows you're clumsy in its element. 30 yards behind his trailer, level with it, not a wobble. No nav strobes, no rotor blur, no intake yawns, no exhaust shimmer. The surface looked less like metal and more like something that had decided to be smooth. He told himself to look straight ahead. He told himself not to panic. He told himself the same thing he always did in bad weather, in close calls and brake checks. Hands light, eyes far, breathe even. The craft didn't care about any of that. It floated up beside him, gliding into the left lane, 20 feet from the driver's door, so near he could have thrown his coffee and hit it. Up close, The black wasn't black. It was the color of a chapel with the lights off. Not absence, presence. Jace didn't see a cockpit. He didn't see anyone at all. Still, he felt watched, studied. He thought of those wildlife shows where biologists tag a shark and then months later pull up the tracking map, the animal's perfect lines back and forth across a trench like stitching. He wondered if a dotted line was drawing itself somewhere with his name on it.
The craft matched his speed for a distance no map could measure. There was a kind of time the road makes, yards instead of minutes, miles instead of hours. In that time, his dash clock stuck on 12:41, an LED too stubborn to count. When his brain noticed, he looked away from the thing long enough to count the seconds and discovered he was counting without the night. He didn't know how long the craft kept him company. He only knows that when it left like a thought. One heartbeat it was there. The next heartbeat, it had turned into a star you couldn't point to twice. Silence poured into the absence it left. The CB was quiet. His engine sounded like something alive and reassuring again. His hands ached without him realizing he'd been clenching them. Routine saves you when nothing else can. He drove. He checked mirrors as if they were superstitions. He talked to himself about fuel stops and hours of service math, because adding numbers you can control is a charm against what you can't. By dawn, the sky had bleached to a proper gray, and a truck stop in Barstow welcomed him with the harsh kindness of fluorescent lights. He did the dance, fueling, squeegeeing flies he hadn't hit, stretching his back in the shadow of his own trailer. That was when he saw them. 7 circles stamped into the aluminum like a god had used a hole punch. Not dents, no scuffs, no bite marks from a careless parking job. Perfect, smooth, the metal around each ring discolored faintly, like it had been warmed rapidly and cooled to a decision. 6 on the circumference, 1 a bullseye in the middle. He placed his fingers on one and felt the way a filling sings when you bite foil. A taste without eating, a sensation without touch. He photographed them like evidence, tilted angles to catch the light, a shoe in the corner of the frame for scale. He said the date out loud, and then felt foolish because there was no one to hear him, but also relieved because dates are something clocks owe you. Denver received his freight and signed the POD like any other day. No one looking at his face could tell he was measuring the shadows in the corners of rooms, as if the triangle had folded itself and hidden there. That night, he parked nose out at a rest area, because the habit of having an escape path had been promoted from sensible to mandatory. He killed the engine, darkness walked into the cab with him, and the CB, which he had quietly sworn to leave on just in case, breathed. Not chatter. Not the pranks of kids, not the comforting nonsense of eastbound, watch your bears. A scale climbed, fell, climbed, a lattice of tones too clean to be accidental, too meaningless to belong to any dispatch. He turned the volume down to something he'd need to lean in to hear, and the melody was the same. 30 seconds. Exactly. Then absence again. Not silence, which is a thing with texture, but absence, which is a hole. He tried to sleep. The body can be stubborn. It slept anyway. 3 weeks softened the memory the way rain softens chalk. He ran the route again, Los Angeles to Denver, night through the Mojave like a moving room of his own blood. The road made its usual offerings, a coyote that darted and thought better of it, a pair of taillights too proud to use their blinker, a diner where an egg tasted like all eggs you've ever eaten at 3 in the morning. By the time he hit the long flat where the radio always struggles, he had convinced himself of the only lie that works: it won't happen again. The lights arrived as if they had been there the whole time, and he had only just now remembered to see them.
Same distance, same obedience to his throttle. He breathed in through his mouth, the air still metallic like before a lightning strike. He watched until thinking became superstition, and he did the thing people do when they're afraid of magic. He reached for his instruments. Phone compass.
The needle jittered, made small circles, then chose north like a person who picks a seat close enough to the exit to count as brave. Dashboard clock. 12:12, then 12:11, then 12:12 again, then 12:13. An apology barged into the middle. He should have pulled into a visible parking lot, under cameras and within shouting distance of men who have reasons to be awake. He didn't. Habit is also a god. The grade this time felt shorter and longer at once. The lights crept, sprinted, arrived. 2 pairs now, 4 coins of white light, set in 2 faces. The craft behind wasn't a twin so much as a brother. If the first had been a manta, this was another ray under the same moon. They coordinated without signaling. They chose their places the way a school of fish turns like one animal. One held the same 30-yard gap behind the trailer. The other floated off his driver's side, a little farther back, so he knew without looking that he was in a parenthesis. He didn't ask why out loud. He had the sense that asking made it realer, and also that they knew the question in him without him insulting them by saying it. The CB stayed quiet until it didn't. The tones returned, a variation on the first song, the kind of change that makes you think there's grammar you could learn if you didn't have to eat or sleep ever again. He pressed the transmit key and felt stupid for planning to say, "What do you want?" to a sound. He said nothing. He let go. He turned the volume knob down all the way. The tones kept singing under the silence, like a radio with ideas about where the knob belongs. He talked to the truck, which is another thing you do when you've been alone long enough that your voice might rust. "Okay," he told the dash, the wheel, the windshield that had taken 1,000 soft insect lives for him. "We're going to drive like this is weather. We know weather. We don't argue weather. We just drive like men who are good at our job." They stayed with him for 12 miles. He knows that because the mile markers finally obeyed, and because counting things you can verify is the same as stitching your skin back together in a pinch. At mile marker 214, he could swear he remembers the number like the face of someone who once lent him a 20. Both triangles flared brighter once, a blink like a nod. Then they rose, not like aircraft and not like birds, like a curtain lifting, up, 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 and gone behind scudding cloud, as if there was a ceiling they liked. Jace pulled into the next stop with lights and people and friction. The attendant pumping coffee into paper cups wore a ball cap from a team that hadn't had a good season in years and said, "Long night?" the way you ask if someone wants another pour. Jace opened his mouth and realized that telling a stranger what followed him felt like putting a bug in her ear that would never stop buzzing. He said, "Yeah," meaning, "Please don't ask the second question." She didn't. He was grateful all the way back to the truck.
You can't sit on something like that forever. It gets heavy. Jay started watching for the men who might hear him without laughing. A skinny guy named Reyes, with hands that remembered manual transmissions. A woman called Jo, who rode with a photo of a dog taped to the dash. You say it sideways with drivers like that. You ever see lights that won't pass? You ever hear music come over 19 that isn't music? You ever feel like someone's writing your trip for you while you're driving it? The answers come sideways, too. I've had nights. I don't stop where the camera doesn't reach. I run the southern route in February, even if it's 2 days stupid. Then, after a pause, "You get any marks?" He showed Reyes the photos. The older man turned the phone in his fingers like it might burn. 7, Reyes said, and held up his hands not to count them, but because saying the number made him want to see his own skin. 6 and 1. Yeah, mine were on the reefer door. Stayed a year before weather took 'em. Joe listened, and then told him a story about Utah, about a patch of I-70 under a sky so clear it felt fake, and a rig that drifted up alongside hers with the same kind of intention. No driver, she said. No one. Just there. I kept both hands where they belonged and didn't look right at it, like you don't stare into the sun. The stories never end.
Not because they're melodramatic, but because they have no last page. The triangles don't announce a schedule. They don't congratulate you for not panicking. They don't put a sticker on your logbook that says, "You survived anomaly number 204. They just appear, and then they don't. And then they do again on a night when you finally convinced yourself you imagined it. The time Jace saw the craft closest to the ground, it wasn't over a highway. He'd pulled off for a bathroom with 2 clean tile and a vending machine that offered 3 varieties of water, because choice is modern. On his way back to his truck, he felt the particular kind of quiet you only notice when the last sound stops. The way a refrigerator kicking off leaves a shape behind it. He looked up. The parking lot lamps painted cones on nothing. Between their halos, a shadow moved like it knew geometry. The triangle was above the far corner of the lot, lower than the roofline of the building, sliding with the slow confidence of something that isn't worried about being seen. It drifted over the blacktop, over the hood of a pickup with a cracked windshield, over the top of Jace's own cab, and paused directly over his trailer, as if reading a label. When it moved on, he realized he'd been holding his breath. He exhaled so hard his vision pinged white at the edges. He climbed into the cab like a man fleeing a storm, and only once he had the door shut did he have the thought that maybe glass and steel weren't going to matter to a thing that moved the way that moved. He started documenting, not because he thought anyone would arrest a triangle for harassment, but because writing is another charm. He bought a small notebook at a pilot with a cover that said "Notes" in block letters that made promises about control. He wrote dates, times, mile markers, cloud cover, whether coffee had tasted like metal, it often did, whether the dash clock had behaved, it rarely did when the lights were near. He kept the notebook in the pocket with his tire gauge, and once he checked the gauge, the notebook shifted and he smelled ozone, the faint, singed air exactness of an outlet you shouldn't have stuck a fork into when you were a kid. He tried a dash cam. Every driver who's been cut off by a sedan that forgot physics lives with a camera now. The footage when the craft paralleled him turned to snow like an old TV lost the channel. The date stamp stayed, the little red dot that means recording stayed, the picture decided the world had become a bad broadcast. When the thing left, the video returned to a night so normal it hurt his feelings.
One trooper heard him without rolling his eyes. It was a Wyoming officer with the kind of tired kindness people get when they've had to knock on too many doors in bad weather. Jace told him enough that would have sounded like a joke to someone in the mood to be superior. The trooper just nodded slowly, took his license like both of them knew this part of the dance, and said, "Some stretches you don't stop unless it's lit up for a birthday party. Some stretches you don't stop even then." He handed the license back and added, "If you hear music that isn't music, pick a populated exit. You might only buy a candy bar. That's fine. Candy bars are cheap." Once, because fear makes men brave in stupid directions, Jace tried to talk to them. The tones had begun. 3 notes up, 1 down, a linger that made the hair on his arms rise and lay down like grass in wind. He pressed the CB key and said in a steady voice that he practiced in his head, "I see you. I won't stop. I won't follow. Please let me pass." He hadn't planned to say please. It slipped out like a truth. The tones halted for exactly 1 second and then resumed on a different pattern. He felt like a child who had knocked on someone's door and been answered in Latin. What do they want? He will not pretend to know. There are theories among the night people, the ones who know the best pies and the fuel cards and where the bathrooms are clean when the map says they won't be. Some say observation. Some say we're as interesting to them as migrating herds are to biologists with drones. Some say they are ours, military, deep black projects whose budgets have zip codes of their own. Some say, don't say they, like there's only one kind of it in the world.
Jace's own theory isn't fancy. He thinks the road is old, and that old things attract old attention. He thinks repetition is a kind of beacon, night after night doing the same thing, same route, same hours, same person in the same place, and that if you were an intelligence looking for patterns, the man who draws the same line across the map 100 times is delicious. He thinks there's a reason truckers see what office folk don't. We are out where the map is thin, where the cell towers run out, where the mile markers stop being numbers someone set and start being beats your heart uses to count itself. The marks faded. Weather will do that to anything. Rain sanded their edges blunt. Sun erased the heat-bruise halo. If he squints in the right light, he finds the ghost of a circle and another ghost of a circle, like a palimpsest, and he remembers he's not crazy, even if being sensible would be easier. Before they dulled, he traced them on a sheet of paper, like a child making a rubbing of a tombstone, and tucked the paper into his logbook. Some nights he opens to it and looks without looking. He changed small habits, as if that would matter. He parks nose out. He takes his 30 where he can see other men taking theirs. He keeps a wool blanket in the cab and a flashlight with a physical click because digital things forget you when you need them. He added a second radio, not because a triangle will hear him better on a different frequency, but because redundancy is kindness to yourself. He doesn't stop for rest areas he can't find on a DOT website. Sometimes the DOT website disagrees with what the sign says on the side of the road. When that happens, he trusts the website.
He still runs the route. You can't quit every place that has scared you and still make a living. But he listens more. He notices the way wind sounds normal when it's wind and wrong when it's something else pushing the air aside. He watches for signs misspelled in the same way old memory misspells things. He pays attention when the clock slides instead of ticks. He respects wrong quiet. If you want a moral, he'll give you one, in a voice that sounds almost embarrassed, because men who drive 22 years don't think they're priests. Keep moving when the lights refuse to pass. Don't pull off into darkness to test your courage when you can stop under neon. Don't answer music with words. Don't be curious if curiosity means stepping into a pocket of night that might fold you. The road collects the things you leave on it: tread, time, sweat, songs you sang badly, fear. It is patient. So are the things that travel it with you. And if you see what he saw, if the black shape slides against your window like an eclipse that only you were told about, put your hands where they belong on the wheel. Breathe. Count mile markers because numbers are rope. Think of your destination like it's a person and you owe them the courtesy of arriving. If a voice inside you or outside says open the door, answer to no one. Jace doesn't end the story with a reveal. There's no payoff where he catches a license plate or learns a name or solves a riddle. He ends it like it is, with the road unspooling ahead of him, the mirrors sometimes empty, sometimes not, the CBs sometimes a human laugh, sometimes a song from nowhere. He ends it with him rolling into a different truck stop on a different night, the neon working in all its letters this time, the clerk looking up and saying, "You want that coffee black?" and him saying, "Yeah," because that's the right answer to a question that has one. He sips it at the counter and watches another driver scrub at a windshield in a kind of trance and thinks, if I told you what followed me, you'd either laugh or tell me your own, and both would be better than keeping it by myself. He thinks, some miles keep you. He thinks, I am not the only one. And when he leaves, when the door chimes and the night presses in and the cab welcomes him like a dog, he checks his mirrors once, twice, 3 times more than necessary. Not out of fear, out of respect,
out of the knowledge that on the loneliest stretches, the road isn't empty, it's listening. It's old. And some nights, when the sky is a lid, and the clock behaves like memory, and the radio hums a tune that doesn't belong to any band you can name, it sends the same companions to see if you remember them. If you do, and if you keep your course, and if you do not stop where the light doesn't reach, you will make your delivery and tell your story at a counter under buzzing bulbs. If you don't, if curiosity or pity or bravado or boredom convinces you to step out into a lot that suddenly feels as private as a closed eye, then maybe the triangles will learn a new route that night. Maybe a dotted line in a system you'll never see will gain another loop. Maybe someone like Jace will sit at a table with a napkin and say, "The last story is from a driver who didn't come back." And someone else will nod because they know the shape of the ending, even when they don't say it. For now, Jace keeps rolling. The highway accepts him. Some nights, it adds a harmony under his engine noise that makes his skin spark and his teeth ache. Some nights, it leaves him alone, like it's busy elsewhere. Either way, he pays attention, which is all he can offer a thing that notices him without asking permission. He will tell you this much as a coda, looking at the reflective glass of the shop window like he prefers seeing his reflection when he says it. If the lights never pass you, don't go where they want you to. If the radio sings a song with no words, turn down the volume, but keep your hands on the wheel. And if you get to choose busy over brave. Then he'll tap the bill of his cap, slide his key into the ignition, and let the big dog rumble. Somewhere miles away, in a sky with no constellations you recognize, something will listen for a familiar frequency and decide to draw a line across the night to meet him. And he'll drive anyway, because the road doesn't care who else uses it, and because that's what he does. The highways are calling, but they're not as empty as they appear. Something else travels these roads in the darkness, following its own mysterious route through our world. And sometimes, if you're unlucky enough to catch its attention, it might decide to follow you too. Sweet dreams and safe travels on America's haunted highways.